so we get all
Yeah.
that,
Sure.
all the questions.
While experiencing awareness, I noticed that the voice in your head, it's always there, personality. But that with continued practice, that voice seems to be quieting down, personality. And I'm just curious, would that be what they refer to as letting go of conditioning?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the practice of meditation could be said to be the practice of letting go. And as you practice letting go, what are you letting go of? You're letting go of the identity of being a person. And when you let go of the identity of being a person, you're letting go of the thinking activity that that person identifies with. So over time, just by being still and quiet, the activity there that has been maintained by your attention and increased by your attention and involve craziness that you were giving attention to, because it's a reactive mind, it's a reactive personality. Just by being still and sitting quietly and paying attention to the breath and having the intention of letting go and calming, I say calming, but if you're sitting still and being quiet and you're paying attention to the breath at the Dantian, that will be a letting go. So the answer to your question is yeah, over time. And not only is it the case that it gets quieter there, but according to Advaita Vedanta, that's the primary purpose of meditation, is to get the junk out of the way, to get the mental material, the reactive ideas, the beliefs, the constant narrative that is the voice in the head, to have that begin to quiet down so that there's space and openness. And with that open space, it becomes much more possible and much easier to see, because all the noise, all the obstacles have come down. And so this is why, not only in meditation, but as you're living your life after practicing consistently, that you start to be more present, because there's less material in your head taking your attention. So you're seeing more than you were seeing. You're aware of more what you're aware of in real time. One of the things about that occurred to me is that, for the most part, until we wake up, we're living in a map of life, not life. Because we live in a conceptualization of our lives. We live in a conceptualization of who we are. We live in a conceptualization of what's happening. And so we're living in a map life, the idea of the map is the map is not the territory is not a new idea. People talk about that all the time. And in terms of these practices and teachings, it has a particular relevance, because we're talking about non-duality. And when you talk about non-duality, the idea the map is not the territory can be a useful concept to use to get beyond that concept. For example, obviously Philadelphia is not Philadelphia. Most people would say, what are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. Well, it's the truth that Philadelphia is not Philadelphia. Philadelphia, if you go to Philadelphia and look around, you can't find any Philadelphia, right? So the experience of being in Philadelphia is not Philadelphia, right? And then if you go up from ground level and look down, Pennsylvania is not Pennsylvania either, right? And the border between Pennsylvania and Delaware and the border between Pennsylvania and New Jersey doesn't exist. There is no separate states in reality, right? Isn't it interesting? There is no separate states in terms of the land, right? There is no separate states in terms of consciousness either. except we put the map, we lay a map over that and see separation, right? We see the difference between this body and that body, right? But just like there's no difference between Pennsylvania and Delaware, exactly the same. I mean, if you look and look, and what your eyes tell you is, I don't see any borders. I don't see any, Philadelphia. I don't see any Pennsylvania. I don't even see a world. I don't even see any world. I don't see Europe. I don't see South America. I don't see, right? So this is the difference between seeing what we learn to be the case, which is a conceptualization of reality, and reality. So in the same way, if you apply the same logic to who we are, if you look in the mirror, what do you see, right? The voice in your head starts to describe what you see, but that's just like the map isn't the territory. If you look beyond that, if you understand, okay, concepts play, I've learned that, that's my conditioning, but if you look beyond that into the mirror, you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know what you're looking at. One of the things that we talk about here is that the experience of being aware is not at all like the conceptualization of it. It's not at all like the conceptualization of it. It's not a concept. So you could say that when we're practicing meditation, we're sitting there tuning into the breath, letting go, right? Letting go of what? Letting go of tension. Letting go of the relationship to the voice, and just experiencing being. And the experience of being is not being. Right? The experience of being is indescribable, but it's there. And this is what we're reorienting ourselves to, reality, the reality of what we are, the reality of the world, right? And the reality of the world is not the map of it. It's not the map of it. And we have no skill in functioning in the non-conceptual world. We have no skill with that, because our orientation, our conditioning has been completed in such a way that we relate to that like it's real, and I am this body, and I am this name, like that. The Buddha, there's a story that says the Buddha, in one of his teachings, was going to give a talk, and he stood up before the group of monks and went over and picked up a flower and held the flower up. And that didn't say anything, and then sat down. One monk in the monastery smiled. He was the next abbey. Okay. What was he saying? What was he saying? For a lot of people who live in a conceptual understanding about everything, to look at somebody holding a flower, they would say, okay, what? Sure. You know what I mean? What? Say something, right? Because people can't hear the truth, and people can't see the truth because we've been conditioned out of it, right? And only one person in that room saw the truth, right? When he held up the flower, right? When he held up the flower, what he was presenting is, this is not a flower. This what you look at, and you have a direct experience of this, right? Without it being a flower, without you knowing anything about it, right? It's beautiful. Yeah. You just have this visceral experience of what you're looking at, right? And this caused the monk to smile. So you see, when we're learning to meditate, we're learning that the real world is not a map. The real world is not a concept. Other people are not concepts. Life is not a concept. Life is nothing other than an experience. And then, then the thing about that is that, okay, so what? Well, so what is that most of us are not living life, we're living a conceptual understanding of life that shows up in thinking all day long. And because that's not life, because it's a map, right? And now watch, because it's a map and because all of us have slightly different maps, right? So according to your map, you may think that, this is a certain way, but I'm following a map that's different than your map. So now which map is the truth, right? And there you go, that's the human condition, right? Not only which map is the truth, but which map is the right map and the better map and the true map, right? This is the condition that we're experiencing in the world, right? Everybody is constantly in this process of being right, you know, looking good, being in control, avoiding domination, dominating, right? This is the way of the human being in this world that we live in, right? And it's such a conditioned and hypnotic state, right, that it's not recognized for what it is. It's considered to be the truth. You know, we know, for example, we know that the self-image is an image. We talk about self-image, it's an image. We know that the personality is a persona. The word persona means mask. Well, if we know that the image is an image and we know that the mask is a mask, why do we still take it to be the self? It's an image of the self, not the self. It's a mask of the self, not the self. So this is a pretense, you know. The way that the consciousness or the way that the awareness exists in the world is it pretends to be something. It's a pretense. You're pretending to be a person. You know, so one of my friends posted something on Facebook I saw today, and it was a picture of, I think it was a picture of pigeons, pigeons, and it said, the universe is pretending to be pigeons. That's a non-dual perception, right? The universe is pretending to be you. The universe is pretending to be a camera. The universe is pretending to be the world. The universe is pretending to be the world, right? And when you get clear about reality and you understand, well, if that's the case, then my continual illusion, my continual involvement with illusion, which is not that the universe is pretending to be me, but that I am me, right? And now, once you separate yourself from the universe and decide that you're separate from the universe and you are you, not the universe is you, right? Now you're on your own. No wonder you're anxious. See? No wonder you're anxious. No wonder you're fearful. Because you've separated yourself from reality. You've separated yourself from the truth. So meditation and these teachings and practices are about coming home, coming back, right? The thing that makes it interesting and complicated is that when you come back, when you get home, when you experience that you're home, which is already always the truth, right? Mm-hmm. Which means, so another way of saying the same thing is when you stop experiencing yourself the way you think you actually are and discover the truth and begin to experience yourself the way you really are, right? Then you're coming out of the dream, you're coming out of the conceptual reality, you're coming out of the map understanding of things, and you're beginning to make contact with reality, with the truth, with yourself. And not only is that the case, but the other thing that's the case that is really why all this is so important is because when you do that, as you do that, and when you do that, and as you succeed with that, all that didn't work and was problematic and resulted in suffering begins to disappear. Because its existence depended on your continuing to think you're the map. Its existence depended on you continuing to think that the voice in your head is you. You know, its existence depended on you continuing to think that the world is out there, separate from you, right? So these teachings are a way of talking about the truth conceptually. Meditation is a way of using the concepts to understanding why to sit here and be still, and why to focus on the breath to be in the present moment. But the purpose of it all is to come out of the conceptual existence and into the reality. Come out of the idea I have about myself and experience what I actually am, which is this awareness. Right? And as you begin to experience this awareness and you begin to experience that its nature is to simply be present, its nature is simply to exist. Its nature is simply to enjoy the experience of life, to enjoy the experience of being a human being, to enjoy the experience of the game of life, the drama of life, the challenges of life, right? But without any threat. Don't forget, the Course of Miracles says in the beginning of the Course, right? What is real cannot be threatened. They're referring to you. They're referring to the truth. They're referring to awareness. What is real cannot be threatened. And what is not real doesn't exist. So when you are practicing and as you're coming out of this conditioned state in which you are afraid and you're separate and you have to really effort a lot, you know, to protect yourself and survive and to get what you want and to avoid what you don't want and all that, right? That while all that's going on, there is a awareness that's aware of all that, but is not suffering. Is actually enjoying the show, right? While you're busy being part of the show, suffering, right? So that's why, you know, in listening to Swami S, I'm going to learn his name because I like the guy and I think I think I should just learn his name. It's a challenge, right? But I've been listening to his teachings recently and very clear pointing. I highly recommend him, and I've sent a video out, you know, a link to the video out to the email. And you know what he's teaching is that it's possible to wake up. It's possible to come out of this condition. And as you're coming out of this condition, you really need support, and you really need a community, and you really need to depend on you having faith in the truth and the teachings, right? Because don't forget, as you're coming out of this condition, you're leaving behind the identity and the conceptual understanding of everything and coming into making contact with reality, right? In that process, there will be an intense experience of fear. Because according to who you thought you were, you're dying. You know, according to, and you are dying the death of something that didn't exist. You are dying the death of something that never was real. But the system doesn't know that. The system was conditioned to believe that it is real. So there's going to be this process in which the fear will show up, and it will try and convince you to go back. It will try and convince you to stop, because if you keep going, you're going to die. You know, this is suicidal. You're doing something that's suicidal, right? Now, it may not present itself that way. It may present itself in some other thought processes, but the point of it is to get you to stop. Okay. And if the community support is there, and you have a teacher, and you have the teachings, and you have the practice to depend on, then you can make it through that process of fear, and begin to discover that if you don't resist, if you don't try and run, you know, if you just stay there with it, right, that the truth will prevail. The truth will prevail. And gradually the fear will dissipate, right? And then as you move closer to the experience of fulfillment, the experience of being yourself, the experience of being real, as the Swami S says, right, and the more I hear him say this, it's obvious he's quoting it directly from the teachings, right? The Sat Chit Ananda, Sat Chit Ananda. That's the being of awake being, Sat Chit Ananda. When he teaches, I hadn't heard him say this clearly until I listened several times, but during his talks, he always throws that in, Sat Chit Ananda. He says it quickly, right? But that's an identity. He's saying, you can be Sat Chit Ananda. What's Sat Chit Ananda? Existence, consciousness, bliss. You can be that, Sat Chit Ananda. You exist, you're conscious, and if you identify yourself as that consciousness, bliss. Existence, consciousness, bliss. That's the whole teaching right there. Right? Any other questions? Did that?
Yes, that was very good.
All right. Anybody else?
Just out of curiosity, do things ever quiet down with that voice in your head? I mean, like completely just sort of fizzle away? I mean, I know you're always going to hear personality in some way, but I mean, does it Does it just ever just go away? Just out of curiosity.
I don't think so. I mean, it hasn't for me, so I can't tell you from my experience. I haven't heard anybody say that. And the reason I don't think I've heard anybody say that, and I don't think it does go away, it gets quieter, right?
Mhm.
Because it stops mattering. You see, the more awake you get, the less it matters, you know, whether it's there or not. Because if you know what it is, it won't talk you back into being it. If you know what it is, you won't attribute reality to it. If you know what it is, you'll treat it like a child, right? If you know what it is, when it plays in your mind, you relate to it like a child. It's innocent, it's very limited, like a child, right?
Mhm.
So you don't get mad at it, you don't try and stop it, you know, you let it say whatever it wants to say, but you're not following it, you don't consider it to be you. That's what the shift is, right? So you can allow everything to continue to be the way, you can continue to allow the map to be there. You have to continue to allow the map to be there. You have to continue to allow all the conceptual realities to continue to exist. And thinking is part of that. So we're not, you know, we learn to once you're awake and the mind takes its appropriate place, in other words, it's not determining you, it works for you now instead of you working for it. And most people don't even know they work for their mind.
Sure.
They don't even know that they're following the voice in their head and they think it's them. Once that shift occurs and the mind is now following you, right, it becomes a child. It becomes, it's not that you're not willing to listen to it, but you listen to it with discretion. When it's making sense, no problem. You know, when it's making sense, no problem. When it's when it's the working mind and you're using thinking to do something, right? See, you're using thinking, not thinking is using you. You're using thinking to do something, no problem. When it starts getting nuts, still no problem. Because you know that it has a childlike reality. It's got a childlike, you know, way of being. You know, why does it have a childlike way of being? Because most of us haven't matured beyond infancy. That's why it's got a childlike way of being, because people are children, really. I mean, that's the truth in the situation. What would the world be like if everybody grew up? What would the world be like if everybody became an adult, right? They talk about the last president, you know, all the shit that's going on. And they say one of the things that these people that took positions in the White House did it is so there would be an adult in the room. That's damn true, right? But I don't believe that that's just the case about the presidency. It just happens to be that, you know, that's in our face right now. But it's true about everything. Whenever human beings are behaving irrationally and behaving, letting their emotions run the show, letting the voice in their head determine them, right? That's a child. You're dealing with children. And one of the ways that you should relate to the voice yourself, you know, as you're doing this work and you're conscious of it, is you have a child. You used to be that child. Thank God you're not the child anymore, right? You're the adult in the room, right? And so as that child does what it does, right? And by the way, you know, what I mean when I say that is that when that child does what it does, it's like cranky, it wants what it wants, it gets mad when it doesn't get what it wants, right? It's a 2-year-old child, right? Like what do they call the 2-year-old? The terrible twos, right? Yeah. Humanity is living the terrible twos, aren't they? Yeah, because how's humanity any different from a child that's living the terrible twos? Everybody wants what they want. They don't care. They'll do whatever they can to get it. You know, they scream and carry on. They're willing to act out and start breaking stuff and throwing stuff, just like a child. But nobody can see the relationship. Oh, we're adults, right? Because we have adult toys and adult money and adult guns, right? That makes us an adult. If we pay attention to our behavior, the behavior doesn't say there's an adult there, right? But you see, here's the problem, because because we all are, most of us, the large majority of us are children, right, who insist that they are adults, that overrules. So none of us can call each other a child because we've all agreed we're adults, right, even though we act like children. And even though the world is a result of the way children would behave in relationship to the planet, in relationship to each other, in relationship to everything that matters in life. So this practice and these teachings are really about waking up and no longer participating in the childlike behavior that most of humanity is involved with. Now, we still have to be in this world until this show is over, right? Yeah. So how do you deal with that, right? Well, you have to have compassion. You see, that's what they say. You know, that an adult that doesn't know they're a child needs compassion. You know, you need to have empathy for that human being because they have an adult body, they have adult responsibilities, but they can't relate to that or manage that in a mature way, and so their life is a mess. Their life is a mess. And they're confused and upset and distraught and desperate, and they don't know what to do, right? And they still trust the authority figures to guide them, right? And the authority figures are just bigger versions of crazy children. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to depend on them to tell us which way to go. Look at how that's worked out. Right? I mean, one of the things that's clearer now than it's ever been that the political reality is very limited and has gotten out of control in terms of its usefulness and and how realistic it is and how it can serve humanity. Something's got to shift about that, or it's like a human being who is getting so desperate and so crazy that they become homicidal or suicidal. The human race is becoming so desperate and crazy that they're becoming homicidal or suicidal. And so if that doesn't shift, this game will be over, and you know, and God will have to throw the dice again, right? But the evidence suggests that that's the direction things are going in. It's kind of interesting, though, because given the internet, right, all the common people now have access to reality. You know, if all the common people who use the internet united and formed a planetary government, the leaders in the countries couldn't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. That'd be it. Nobody would go to war. People would be unwilling to fight, right? They wouldn't take orders anymore from the leadership, right? Maybe that's an evolutionary reality that's going to happen, you know? It's either going to go that way or the whole show is going to come to an end, right? But you see, here's the beauty. If you do this work and you wake up and you realize the truth, even that's not a problem. Even that's not a problem. Because what it is that we are beyond the map, what it is that we are beyond the concepts, don't forget, it goes right back to what is real can't be threatened. What is real can't even be threatened by the end of the world. You know, and now we have leaders talking about the end of the world, don't we? Sure. I never thought that I would ever see stupidity at that level, that people would actually be threatening to use nuclear weapons. Yeah. And once that's on the table, you know, that's already a step in the direction of it happening. And now they're saying that this leader who's making these threats are using, now watch, this leader makes threats of using nuclear weapons, right? The other world leader that has nuclear weapons say, don't do that because I'll end the world.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Don't do that because I'll end the world. That's crazy time. Right there, that's crazy time. And then the people who are advisors to the leader that made that threat are saying to him, no, we're not saying that you're wrong for making the threat. We're saying you're wrong for not doing it now. That's what's happening. Yeah. That this guy's under pressure from the people around him saying, you know, the reason that you're losing the war is because you're afraid to use nuclear weapons. Yeah. It's insane. And the reality of it is, once a nuclear weapon is used, whether it's tactical or strategic, you can't stop the process. Yeah. Because once a tactical weapon is used, there's got to be a reaction to that.
Yeah.
And once that's done, that ups the ante. And then, you know, you got this person cornered, what are they going to do? You know, if you get somebody cornered that is crazy enough, right, they'll kill you and them. You see it in the news every day, don't you?
Sure.
Yeah, somebody that's a personality that went off the deep end, you know, they go and they go and shoot and kill people that they think are the ones that caused them the suffering, and then they kill themselves and their family. So this is what we're dealing with. All the more reason to wake up. All the more reason not to be a player in that game. All the more reason to use the experience of meditation and these teachings to be transcendental, to transcend this reality. So that the idea that what is real can't be threatened is an experience you're having. You know, then you can do everything you can to help these children get along and hope that they don't end the world. But if it does, it won't be the end for you because you've transcended all that. That's what's possible, you know. That seems pretty incredible, but it is actually the case. And as you continue to do this work, at some point you should have your aim be not to be a transformed human being, right? But to transcend the experience of being a human being at all. If you get that done before the body drops, it'll be your death will be a slight cold. If you don't, well, see, and here's the thing that's interesting about this whole thing, is when the body drops, everybody ends up in the same experience after that, yeah? So that's not a problem. The problem is before the body drops, why keep suffering needlessly when it can stop any time and you can start having a good time here, you know, no matter what the movie ends up being like. Maybe it's because we're so used to going to the movies and seeing the end of the world and seeing, you know, zombie apocalypse and all the rest of the crazy shit that we're making those movies become real, right? Sure. We're turning those movies into the reality of the world. So I didn't mean to bum people out today. But the truth needs to be told, doesn't it? Sure. I mean, you know, if nobody points to the truth, you know, then we'll be following the craziness and thinking that that's going to get us somewhere. But the craziness of the leadership, the craziness of your own mind is not going to ever go anywhere. It can't go anywhere because it doesn't have awake consciousness to see things as they are. It's lost in a bad dream. So, you know, practice meditation and take this seriously, and you can come to a place where, you know, Sat Chit Ananda.